Welcome back to ICCO TUTTI a TAVOLA with Chef Roberto Fracchioni. I hope you had a great Thanksgiving and enjoyed our new cooking class series we started last week, featuring the cuisine of the southern Italian region of Calabria. Tonight, we're happy to welcome a new sponsor for this series, the Consortium of the Prosciutto di Parma, an excellence in the Italian cuisine. The Italian phrase at the end of the video we just saw translates as follows. In the most meaningful moments, there is always a prosciutto di Parma. It is not Parma ham, but it is Parma prosciutto, as a matter of fact. You may be familiar with prosciutto di Parma in a charcuterie board or as appetizer with seasonal fruit, for example, or in a true Italian panino. But in this series of classes, Roberto will show us other creative ways to prepare it for super tasty breakfasts and delicious lunches and dinner. And Chef Roberto will tell us how to recognize prosciutto di Parma at the deli counter. Only hams produced in the countryside surrounding the city of Parma in north-central Italy, where the dry, sweet air creates the perfect conditions for the natural curing of the hams, can be called prosciutto di Parma, which is fire branded with the world-famous five-pointed Parma crown, which identifies it as genuine. Our chamber has been working on an ongoing project called True Italian Taste, with a series of initiatives since 2016 to promote certified products that guarantee excellence in the food sector, reaching out to consumers so that they can make informed choices when grocery shopping. Prosciutto di Parma is the perfect example of uniqueness and excellence that goes from the farm to the table, along with other world's famous products such as Parmigiano Reggiano, always from the Parma area, that are renowned internationally. Chef Roberto knows prosciutto di Parma very well, not only because his family is originally from the same region in Italy, but also because he's really passionate about authentic and certified Italian products, and above all, because he has been the Canadian brand ambassador for prosciutto di Parma for the past 3 years. In tonight's class, Roberto will show us how to use this traditional Italian product, prosciutto, to prepare 100% North America delicious breakfast, Eggs Benedict. Before we start, I would like to invite you to join us next Tuesday for the Tutti a Tavola in Calabria class, which will feature a full menu including a spicy and tasty pasta dish. Also, don't miss Great Canadian Wines on Thursday, October 22nd. We'll have a tour of the Two Sisters Vineyard and Restaurant, learn about their great wines of the Niagara region, and pair them with excellent local products. Roberto will be back on October 27 with another prosciutto di Parma recipe. Please mark your calendar and stay tuned from November 23rd to November 27th. That's the International Week of Italian Cuisine, and we're working on a great event that you will absolutely love. And now it's time for Roberto to start. How are you, Roberto? So you're gonna tell us about prosciutto di Parma.
I'm going to tell you everything you need to know and more about prosciutto di Parma.
Go ahead.
So, welcome back, everybody. It's been a couple weeks, but thank you all for tuning back. Today's class and the next 3 classes are very, very special to me because prosciutto is absolutely one of my favorite ingredients. And we all know it, as Tiziana said. We know it on charcuterie boards, wrapped around melon and wrapped around fig. And what I want to do is sort of guide you through using it as an ingredient, actually cooking it, actually using it in place of bacon and pancetta and all those other recipes, diced up pieces of sausage and all those other things. You can substitute prosciutto, and it makes a wonderful, wonderful addition to the recipe. So prosciutto di Parma, I could spend 5 hours just talking about prosciutto di Parma. I don't think you guys would be too happy about that. So please feel free to ask as many questions as you want. I'll be happy to answer them all. But before I start explaining the product, I have to get some stuff in the oven. So I'm doing two different recipes today, and they are sort of a take on two different Canadian. Well, one is definitely a North American dish, eggs Benedict, that we're going to do with a little Italian flair. So first thing we have to do is take some prosciutto di Parma. And one of the challenges when you're buying prosciutto di Parma is to make sure that it's sliced properly. And by properly, I mean very, very, very thin. So the idea is when a piece of prosciutto di Parma is sliced, you should be able to read through it. So you can see that logo right through the slice of prosciutto. I don't want to get this all oily, but I got to demonstrate that. So if it's too thick to be able to read, that means it's too thick to enjoy. When you have a piece of prosciutto that's that thick, it's just very tough, and you end up chewing on it, and it doesn't dissolve in your mouth. The fat just sort of, sits in your mouth, and you have to chew it up, and it slowly dissolves, and you just don't get the flavor profile of the prosciutto. So when you're buying this in the grocery store, just ask them to slice it as thin as they possibly can. So they're going to give you a slice, and they're going to say, "Is that thin enough?" And you're going to say, "No, thinner." And then they're going to try, and they're going to say, "Is that thin enough?" And you're going to say, "No, thinner." And this is going to go on 2 or 3 times until they figure it out that you're not messing around and you want it sliced super thin. Now, they may roll their eyes and they may grumble about it. Honestly, it's not the same if it's thick. If it's so thick that it's like shoe leather, I mean, we call it a bistecca. We call it a steak when it's cut too thick because it's cut like a piece of steak. That's not cool. So first thing we want to do is take our prosciutto di Parma, lay it out on a baking tray with a little bit of parchment paper, and we just fire this in the oven. So 350 degrees. It takes about 17 minutes, but it kind of depends just how you want it. It's very similar to how you cook bacon. Some people like it with a little bit of chew left in it. Some people like it crispy. Ideally, you want it super crispy, and you'll see why when it's done. Quick, you're going to do this crispy prosciutto. Cook twice as much as you need. The recipe calls for, I think, 12 slices. Cook 24 because you're going to eat it. You're going to snack on it. Prosciutto di Parma is fantastic raw, but this way, honestly, it's hard to stop eating them. So cook twice as much. You'll have enough for yourself and for anyone else who's hanging out in the kitchen who wants to snack on crispy prosciutto di Parma. Pointing off camera at someone who's been eating my prosciutto all day. So the next thing that we're going to do with the prosciutto is we're going to start the next recipe that we're doing. This is sort of, again, a very classic North American breakfast, which is a quiche. Basically, we're going to make a quiche. But instead of taking eggs and cream and broccoli and all that kind of stuff, we're going to, again, accentuate it with a little bit of prosciutto di Parma. So first thing we do is we take a muffin mold. So I'm making little mini full-size muffin trays if you want. It really doesn't matter. I just like the little guys because they're a lot easier to eat. So this is a silicone one. You can use metal. It really doesn't matter. But you take your silicone or you take your muffin tray and we just it with the pieces of prosciutto. So when you get a nice big full slice of prosciutto, like this one, quite often they'll break in half, just because that's the way that the muscles are. So don't worry about it if it breaks in half. See this nice little beautiful, tasty, delicious piece of fat? Don't pull that off. Keep that on there. And what we do is we just the inside of our muffin trays with a piece of the prosciutto, just like that. Don't worry if it's not perfectly flat. It's really hard to get it perfectly flat. It's all right if there's little bits hanging out because that's going to get crispy and delicious and wonderful. So we just fold it in. If you get a bottom, which happens sometimes, You could just take another slice of prosciutto and see, like here, there's just a tiny, tiny, tiny little hole in that piece of prosciutto. Put that in. You're going to push it into the mold. And then I'm just going to take another little piece off of this guy. I'm just going to tear a little corner off and put it on top of where that hole is. And that'll help plug up the hole. So we take a few of these. This used to be one of my go-to hors d'oeuvres. I used to serve these all the time, Prosciutto di Parma cups. And you can fill it with anything, but I like doing it with a fun little breakfasty action. And they hold really well. Once they're cooked, you can fire them in the fridge overnight and then just pop them in the oven again, just warm them up a little bit, and ready to. So we take our prosciutto cups. I'm going to do a bunch of them because, like I said, they're quite tasty. Put them in my son's lunch tomorrow for school. Make all the other kids jealous. And there we go. So once your trays are all lined, we take a little bit of grated Parmigiano Reggiano. So this is just Parmigiano Reggiano that I've grated, and we put a little bit in the bottom, not too much. Okay. A couple of things. This acts as the dairy element in your quiche. Instead of using 35% cream, we're using something with a bit more flavor, and that is Parmigiano Reggiano. And it also helps plug up any of those little holes that we happen to have in the bottom, because we are going to put eggs into here, just plain old eggs. So I'm going to fill these. And before I move on to the next step, are there any questions yet, or can I just keep on going? Awesome. Okay. No questions.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't unmute myself. There are some questions. Sorry.
Okay.
Chef. I guess from how you described the slices should be, I guess it's better to order the prosciutto di Parma at the deli counter instead of getting the prepackaged one. Is that correct? And then how do you know you're getting the real prosciutto di Parma if you're buying it at the grocery store?
Well, that's a big thing, making sure that it's really prosciutto di Parma. So the real prosciutto di Parma has a seal on it. They're actually branded with the 5-pointed crown. So this little seal doesn't go onto a piece of prosciutto di Parma. It meets all of the criteria. So when you go to the deli counter, you have to look. You have to ask them to see the leg, or if it's well displayed in the counter, you can just look for yourself, and you just that you see that little 5-pointed crown on it. There's a lot of confusion. There's some people who's, counterfeit it, who call it prosciutto di Parma when it's really not prosciutto di Parma. So you have to do a little bit of research on your own. Now, if you're going to a reputable deli, they're not going to try and pull the wool over your eyes. They're probably going to make sure that you are getting the authentic stuff, but it doesn't hurt to check. So if you look the actual legs when it's in the deli counter, how can I show this? We'll do it over here. We'll do it on the cutting board camera. You have to see this little, so that prosciutto di Parma logo doesn't go on a piece of ham until it meets all of the requirements. So you look for that. As far as ordering it from the counter versus the pre-sliced, I always get it from the counter. And I suggest that you get it from the counter for a few reasons. One, you're sure it's prosciutto di Parma. It's fresher. It's absolutely fresher because it's coming off the leg and into a container and in your bag to go home. And you can get it sliced thinner. When it's pre-packaged, generally the pre-packaged pieces of prosciutto di Parma are sliced a little bit thicker. And the reason is it just holds the packaging. If it's super thin, it just sort of tears and breaks as you're trying to get it out. So it's sliced a little thicker. It's not the end of the world. If you're in a rush, grab the prosciutto di Parma that's already prepackaged. But the consorzio, the governing body of prosciutto di Parma, dictates that any sliced prosciutto di Parma has to be sliced in Italy and packaged in Italy in special packaging that very clearly displays the fact that it's prosciutto di Parma. So if you're buying prosciutto di Parma that's already sliced in a package, it could be prosciutto di Parma, it might not be. There's always the question. You're better off just to go to the counter. Honestly, it takes 5 minutes to wait for some prosciutto. It's not the end of the world. We shouldn't be in that big of a rush that we can't wait 5 minutes to get some fantastic prosciutto.
Thank you, Roberto. Do you have time for another answer to a question?
I'm gonna get this. I'm gonna move on to the next step, and then I will ask.
Perfect.
Okay. So the the eggs have gone into the mixing bowl. I threw a little bit of Parmigiano Reggiano in there. This is a little bit of truffle puree. So we throw a little bit of truffle puree in. This, I mean, if you like truffle, you put more. If you don't like truffle so much, skip it. Put some olives in. Put, I don't know, pesto in. Put anything that you want to eat. And then once our olive puree goes in, we can start filling our cups. So we just take a little bit of this and slowly, I should have got a bigger spoon. And can you guys see that? Yeah. So we just fill it up. And remember, these are eggs. They're going to souffle. So don't fill them right up to the top. You want to leave a little bit of room or else they'll spill over and they'll kind of really nasty muffins. So leave a little bit of space at the top for the eggs to expand. Once in, we can pop these into the oven. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So yeah, any questions? There's more questions?
Yes, actually, yes. One question that we just received is what is the advantage of prosciutto di Parma from Italy over cured hams from other countries such as Spain? And then also where can you buy truffle puree?
Well, I mean, prosciutto di Parma versus Iberico hams versus Canadian hams. Like the prosciutto is produced all over the world. It's a different process. With prosciutto di Parma, they've been doing it for thousands of years. They figured it out. The consorzio really controls the process in which it is made. So what you're doing is what happens with prosciutto di Parma is getting a taste of the terroir. Now we use the word chefs, we use the word terroir all the time. We throw it around like, I don't know, it's a nice catchphrase. But with prosciutto di Parma, it is for real. When you stand outside of the curing houses in Parma, in the springtime, when the chestnut groves are in bloom, the air is so heavily scented from the chestnut blossom that gives the prosciutto its flavor. It's different. If you're getting a prosciutto di Parma, you're getting the breeze, this kind of Niagara Valley coming up from the ocean. So it imparts a different flavor into the ham. Even around Italy, from the north to the south to the middle, it's all about the flavor. It's different in every region, and it's different in every country. Iberico hams, the pigs are fed a little bit different in Spain. The curing process is different. So you end up with a completely different product. Not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that it's different. Some people love it, some people don't. Some people love prosciutto di Parma, and some people, okay. I'm just going to tell you with Parma, it's done right. It's pork, it's salt, it's nothing else. There's no other ingredient, no nitrates, no sulfates, no pepper. You can on a piece of prosciutto di Parma and still have it called prosciutto di Parma. So that flavor, it really appeals to me. It's clean, it's not overly salty, it's not overly tough, which some other countries produce very tutti. So it's different in flavor, definitely different in flavor and different in texture. Very long answer, I'm sorry.
That's great, thank you. And actually the truffle puree, can you substitute it with something else if you want to?
Absolutely. I love the flavor of truffle and eggs. The flavor of prosciutto and truffle works well together. So yeah, I'm just throwing truffle puree into it. Again, if you don't like truffle or you don't have truffle, some olives. Throw some chunks of olives in there. Throw in some vegetables if you want. Throw in some kale. Like, just go through your fridge. You're making a quiche. So whatever flavor you like, put it in there. Make sure it's not too sweet. Make sure it works with prosciutto. But yeah, anything can be substituted. I do olives all the time in it. If I don't feel like truffles, because kind of a big flavor, yeah, just throw some olives in there, some olive puree or some chopped up olives.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so next we're going to move on to the Italian egg. So Hollandaise is something that everybody should learn how to make. Now, a Hollandaise sauce, when I was in school, I could not, oops, I did that backwards. I could not make a Hollandaise to save my life. I remember in school wrestling with the Hollandaise, breaking the Hollandaise. Every time I tried to make Hollandaise, it split and it didn't work out. So I did what a good culinary student would do, and I went and bought, I don't know, like 8 dozen eggs and a case of butter. And I just made Hollandaise and made Hollandaise and made Hollandaise and made Hollandaise until I mastered how to do it. It's very, very simple if you just follow a couple simple rules, which I'm going to show you today. First and foremost, you have to be very gentle with the Hollandaise. And that was always my mistake. I always used too high of a heat, and I would scramble my eggs. So we're going to take it very gentle, very easy when we cook these eggs, and you'll see just how easy it is to do. So we start with our egg yolks. We add a little bit of lemon juice, and we're going to add a little bit of fresh thyme. So this is just some fresh thyme leaves. Now, there's a bunch of different ways to make Hollandaise. You can add all your ingredients into the bowl and cook it all this way, or you can add it in stages. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do it the way that I always found worked better for me, and feel free to play with it and experiment. We're going to go over to the stove and we're going to start cooking this. During that time, I'm going to toast my little pieces of focaccia. So I specified focaccia because I like the flavor of the focaccia. This has a little bit of roasted garlic and rosemary in it, and so it's a very savory dish. We can get away with that. You can use sourdough bread. You can use, English muffin. You can use whatever you want, as long as it's sort of a lighter kind of bread. So I'm going to pop my muffin in the toaster, and I'm going to start cooking my eggs. So you can see my water is very, very, very lightly simmering. Very bubbles coming to the top, and that's the important part. If it's steaming too much, a couple of things happen. One, you get too much heat on your bowl and you cook your eggs. Two, you'll get a lot of steam escaping through the side of the bowl. And then you're getting hot steam blasting it, and the side of the bowl gets really hot. You can't touch it, or you burn your hand, and that's not cool. So we just put our eggs, vinegar, thyme on the double boiler, and we whisk. And I'm going to demonstrate close up. This is whisking, side to side, back to front. Basically making figure eights, kind of figure eights. Don't do this. This is not whisking, that is stirring. If you go around in a circle, you're not whisking. You have to go side to side, back and forth, so that you really move all of the eggs. You want to make sure that all of the eggs are being constantly moved so that it cooks nice and evenly. Now, every now and again, you go around the outside because we want to make sure we don't get too much eggs splattered up along the side of the bowl. If the eggs splatter up along the bowl, then what's going to happen? That's going to burn. That's going to cook, and it's going to burn, and then you're going to whisk it back into your eggs, and you're going to get a lumpy hollandaise. So this takes a few minutes. The secret here is every now and again, pull out and hold it. Okay? If you're holding it with your hand and you do this, you pull your hand away because it's too hot, and you're going to cook your eggs. So just make sure that you can whisk for, you know, a minute, take the bowl off of the steam, and you can use your hand. If it's too hot to hold in your hand, it's too hot to cook the eggs. And that's the mistake that I always used to make. So while I'm cooking these, do we have any questions, Tiziana?
Yes. Somebody's asking, sometimes I get prosciutto with these little salt balls in the meat. Does that mean it is old or not a good quality?
The salt? Oh, the little crystals, like the little, yeah. So those crystals in a piece of prosciutto, it happens in all protein that is aged. So what those are little amino acids. They're water soluble. So during the curing process, they sort of come together and they form these little, they're called tyrosine crystals. And it's not, a lot of people think that it's a little ball of salt because it's white and has a little crunch to it, but it's not. It's just some little amino acids. You'll see it in aged Parmigiano Reggianos. You'll see it in aged Grana Padano. It's just a part of the protein, the process of aging protein. So no, it does not mean it's bad. Does not mean it's a bad quality at all. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So now you can see that our sauce, our eggs are thick. Okay. See how it's like clinging to my whisk? That's beautiful. So that is cooked. Our eggs are cooked. Now we slowly, off of the heat, remove your pot from the heat or your bowl, and we slowly start adding our butter. Now in the recipe, I specify to put some water into the actual bowl when you start whisking. You can do that, or you can do it this way. So this is butter that has been clarified. So to clarify butter, it's very easy. We just melt our butter, and then you see all that little white stuff on top. We just want to remove that. So you don't have to take it all off, but you want to take as much as you can off. It can just make your hollandaise a little bit chunky. So now that our butter is somewhat, it's half clarified, because in the bottom you can see it looks like milk in the bottom. To properly clarify the butter, we want to remove clear butter from the milky substance in the bottom, but I'm going to leave it because when I make hollandaise, I usually use that to adjust the consistency at the end. That's why I haven't added the water yet. So we start whisking, and slowly start adding our butter. Take your time with this, okay? Let it spin. It's going to move around. You can put the rag. Sometimes, you know, when we're in school and you'll see it in shows where they put a rag, make a little mess. I don't do that because I like the bowl to be able to spin. So we just keep on taking our butter, and right now we're just using the clarified part of the butter. So just liquid that's in the butter. And I know this is a boring part. I'm sorry, guys. But hollandaise, you need patience. So we're whisking in our butter. And the faster you add it, the faster you have to whisk. Now, this is where it's a little bit panicky. Because you can see that it's getting to the consistency of mayonnaise. And cause it's basically what it is. It's oil and eggs, just like a mayonnaise. Don't panic. We're going to adjust the consistency right at the end. What we want to do is make sure that we add enough butter so that it doesn't taste like eggs. And then the consistency we fix right at the end. So, again, don't panic. Keep adding your butter. And the more butter you add, the thicker it'll get. Once you get about half your butter in, you can be a little bit faster with your incorporation of your butter. You can add it a little bit quicker. And you can see how it's super thick now. Still warm, which is okay. And now we're going to add those milk solids. We're going to add that liquid from the bottom of the pan. And this is where we adjust consistency. So I'm going to let the bowl spin as I pour this last little bit of butter. And as the milk solids go in, you'll see that your sauce will start to turn into a sauce. It'll loosen up quite a bit. So here we go. Sorry, I have to pay attention so I don't mess this up. And our milk solids go in, and you can see it goes right back to being a sauce. Okay? So the consistency is a consistency now, which is what we want. So now everything is still warm. The eggs are warm. The butter was warm when I put it in, so it's warm. Don't worry about it now. Don't put it back on your double boiler. If you put it back up there, it will split. It's guaranteed 100%. It will split, and it'll be nasty. So what we want to do is just put it off to the side and keep it warm. That's all we want to do right now is just keep it warm. So I'm going to check our prosciutto. Looking pretty tasty. So our prosciutto, it's out of the oven, is nice and crispy now. So like I said, always cook twice as much as you want because you will eat it like candy. So it's got a little bit of fat on there. You can see it's glistening. Don't worry about that. Leave that on there. It's going to finish. It's going to absorb that fat and give it a little bit more flavor. Oh, that's a beautiful piece. See that nice little crispy piece of fat? Okay, so any questions while I'm taking this off the tray?
Yes, actually. There are a few questions. One is, can you use ghee? It's pure clarified butter. Then the temperature you mentioned it was warm. Any particular, like anything you want to add to that? And if the sauce leaks, what can be done to fix it?
Okay, so can you use ghee? Absolutely can. That is just clarified butter. If you use ghee, right at the end, you will have to add a little bit of water to adjust the consistency to get it back to a sauce form. That's no problem. The temperature of the eggs, you want to cook it to about 147 degrees. You can check it with a thermometer if you want, but generally it's about the thickening. You'll see it thicken. That's what you're looking for. And the last question, I forget.
If the sauce bleeds, what can you do to fix? What can be done to fix it?
If the sauce splits, you feel my pain of splitting. That's what you do. When the sauce splits, you can kind of cheat. There is a cheating method where I'd say 50% of the time it works, where you take an ice cube and you throw an ice cube into your Hollandaise and you whisk it and you cool down the Hollandaise really quick, and sometimes it comes back together, but then you have a cold Hollandaise, which is not very cool, and you can't really heat it up afterwards. What you can do is start again. You get your egg yolks, and you start whisking, but you start with 1 egg yolk or 2 egg yolks, and then you take what split and add it back into the cooked egg yolks. After you whisk your boiler, your new egg yolks, you take the split one and you add it back to the new whisked eggs, and sometimes it comes together. Generally, though, when a sauce splits, I just start over. Honestly, with the staff, you know, I don't know, find some sort of use for it, make a frittata, do something else with it. But generally, it's you spend more time wrestling with it, trying to save a sauce, than it takes to just make a new one.
All right.
Okay, so I'm going to check our little quiches. Oh yeah, they're looking nice. So our quiches just need a few more minutes. So what I'm going to do in the meantime is I'm going to keep on moving with our eggs Benedict. I should have come up with a name for that. Anyway, I'm not that bright. So one thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of green. Now, quite often when you get eggs Benedict, there's usually some steamed spinach on there or something. I'm going to use a little bit of kale. So this is a little bit of Tuscan kale that I'm just going to blanch. No, I'm going to do the eggs first. Oh, I almost messed that up. I'm going to cook that a little bit later. So what we're going to do is we're going to poach our eggs next. So when it comes to this dish, there's a lot of timing that you really have to figure out. So what we want to do is get our water to a boil. I'm going to use the same water that I used before, and we're just going to poach our eggs in that same water. So first thing we want to do is take a little bit of vinegar, white vinegar, and we put a little bit of vinegar into our water, and I mean a little bit. This serves one purpose. This just the eggs, especially the whites, all together while it's cooking when you're poaching it. If you put too much vinegar in, your eggs will taste, they won't break apart as easily, which is, good, especially if you're a newbie for poaching eggs. But the problem is your eggs taste like vinegar, and we don't want them to taste like vinegar. And this is the number one problem across when I'm at a restaurant is that I'll get poached eggs and I can smell the vinegar on it when they bring it to the table. So just a little splash of vinegar, and now we take our egg and we're going to crack it into a cup. So I'm just going to use a little espresso cup. Use anything that will hold the volume of the egg, but you don't want to crack it out of the egg into the water. You want to make sure it's in a separate little container. And the reason is you have more control when you do it this way. So I'm going to, just in case I break one, because, that happens. And we're waiting for our water to come back up to a nice light simmer. And this is important. You keep your water boiling. If your water is boiling and you drop your egg into it, it will break all of the egg white apart, and it'll look like really scrambled eggs. It won't look good at all. So I'm going to check these really quick because I think they're going to be ready. All right. So these are little, oh, yeah, that's all right. Our little, I don't know what you want to call them. They just need a little more time. What we're checking for, the eggs are cooked for sure, but we just want to make sure that the prosciutto is. So I'm just going to put them back in for a couple more minutes. And in the meantime, I'm dropping my temperature down because I have a good little simmer going on. I want to drop it down a little bit. And now we go to poach our eggs. When we poach our eggs, we take a spoon and we make a little whirlpool. So just swirl the water around so that you're making a nice little whirlpool. And then we drop our egg right into the center of the whirlpool. That does a couple of things. One, because it's moving, it won't stick to the pot. And also, you can see how all the whites stay together. Now, if you have super fresh eggs, they're less likely to sort of split apart. But if you're using older eggs and you don't do that little whirlpool, as soon as you drop the egg, it disintegrates. And you get all these little, you can see all these little pieces of egg white that's floating around. That's not too bad, one little piece. If you don't do it properly, you'll get 8 or 9 of those. It'll look like a big nasty octopus in there, and we don't want that. So we just, nice and gentle. You can see the water is not a super heavy boil. We do not want it to boil. So, any questions while we're watching eggs poach, as boring as that is?
Yes, actually, it's some question going back to the sauce, actually. So sometimes it says my milk solid separate from my sauce. Did I under whisk it? And
your what? Sorry.
Did I under whisk?
Oh no, but sorry. What happened to the actual sauce?
Solids, if the milk solids separate from the sauce, did I under whisk it? I'm sorry. This is about the butter, I guess.
Yeah. So you're there's a few things that it could be if it's split. 9 times out of 10, it's the temperature. It just means that or butter in the pan. Do we know?
Sorry?
If it's the butter in the pan, where the milk solids split, that's fine. When you whisk, in the end, you can see that everything went into the pan and everything went into the pot anyway. So even if the milk solids kind of come out and float around in the butter, it's not. If it's when you're incorporating the butter into the sauce and you get little chunky bits in there, that's, like I said, more often than not, that is the eggs scrambling and cooking.
Okay.
Okay. So there was another question. I just got a message about truffle paste.
If sauce is made but cools down, can it be warmed up again?
Very, very, very carefully. The sauce up is basically with ambient temperature. So that means keeping it in a warm spot and agitating it, whisking it like this, and slowly, slowly bringing it back up to a sauce. Hollandaise can't ever boil. Like, you can't simmer it again. Once it's cooked, and you can warm it up, but you can't boil it. So very slowly bring it up to temperature, and yeah, you can kind of save it that way. But it's best just to keep it warm. This is why health inspectors hate Hollandaise, because it can't be boiled again. So it's really hard to hold it at a temperature. When you're working in a commercial kitchen, you're doing a breakfast, a brunch service for 4 hours, it's really hard to hold it at the proper temperature for that amount of time. So generally what I always did is I would just make a Hollandaise every half hour, just sort of stagger it throughout the course of a brunch period.
All right.
And I did get a question about the truffle paste and where to get it. So good Italian, delis will have it. Italy has it. That's where I got this one. I know a few other good Italian bake shops that I've come across it. Just keep your eyes out for it. It's a great product to have kicking around in your fridge. It's sort of essential for my son's development, because when he loved truffle, but he didn't like other kinds of vegetables. So when he didn't like any kind of vegetable as a baby, I would just put truffle oil on it, and he would eat whatever vegetables I put. So good little trick to have up your sleeve.
That's interesting. Do we have time for a few more questions, Roberto? Or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So can you add 2 eggs at a time when poaching?
You can.
Oh, the volume went. We can't hear you anymore. Sorry. So we were just asking Chef Roberto if he can.
Hello?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Now you can hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, that's odd. Okay. So yeah, I don't stick them together. I don't put them together because if you put 2 into a pot together, there's a good chance that they're going to stick together. Like, they're actually going to come together and stick. And then you have these little Siamese eggs that are like impossible to get apart. So I usually don't. Now, generally in restaurants, or I do this every Sunday for my family. And so I always pre-poach all the eggs. So you take them to a level where you can see here, this is the yolk, and it's still very, very liquidy. This is the white part, and you just poke it with your finger, and you can start to set up when it starts to get firm. So I take it to this level where it's still a little bit liquidy, like the white part isn't completely set, and I just put them on a rag off to the side. And as long as it doesn't have a lot of lint on it, you're cool. They can hang out for a while. They'll carry over cook. If it's going to be more than like 15 minutes, you can put it in the fridge and cool it down. And then when you get an order, or when I finally get my family to the table for brunch, you take these and you just drop them back into the water to reheat them. And that's generally how it's done in restaurants, and that's generally how I do it when I'm doing it at home. So that one's just a little bit underdone, so I'm just going to finish it.
Perfect. So usually, how long do you poach the egg for?
4 minutes. They really don't take that much time.
You
so I think about 3 or 4 minutes. Yeah, 3-4 minutes. It all depends how hard you want your yolks. Now, I always like mine to have still very runny yolks. I like to crack liquid pour out, and it's just this natural, beautiful egg sauce. But if you like it solid, you like them completely cooked, then they take about an extra 2 minutes. So here are little, so now you can see our prosciutto is nice and crispy. So we just leave that off to the side. I take out my egg and drain it onto a rag. I'm just going to blanch some kale. So this is a little bit of Tuscan kale. Now the acid that's in this water is all right. Okay, it's gonna set the color. It's gonna make it cook, give it a tiny bit of. But we just blanch it in the water just for a few seconds, and then we take a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, and salt and pepper first so that it actually sticks to the leaves, and then a little drizzle of olive oil just to give it some extra flavor. And our kale is done. So our kale is done, our eggs are done. Right here, it's time to start plating. So I'm going to bring all my ingredients over to the cutting board. I'm going to plate all this stuff, and hopefully you will be impressed. Now this is a lot easier than it looks. I know I might have scared you all about Hollandaise by talking about my nightmarish experiences of cooking Hollandaise. But once you get used to making Hollandaise, it's really not that scary. It's more about the timing. Always get it done first. It's better to have it done and just hanging out, getting everything else done, getting your eggs poached, getting your prosciutto ready, getting your bread toasted, and then you go to make a Hollandaise last minute because you want nice hot sauce on top of it, and then your Hollandaise splits, and then you got to start over again, and then your eggs overcooked, and then your hair out and you're stressed. Don't worry about it. Get the Hollandaise. It's the hardest thing to do. Get that out of your way first and let it hang out in a warm spot, and everything will be wonderful. I promise. So now we're going to plate our food. So first thing I'm going to plate are our little Parmigiano baskets. So they come out nice and easy, and they're nice and crispy. So to plate these, I got a loose piece of thyme. To plate these, I'm just going to put them on a platter. This is something I do when I do brunch with my family. I'll quite often and just sort of throw them out as, put them out first as a sort of a breakfast antipasto. So nice crispy little pieces of prosciutto with basically a frittata in the inside. A little basil I'm going to put on top. Oh, come on. Of course my basil doesn't want to participate. So a little bit of basil. You can throw anything on here. You don't have to either. I just like garnishing things. And we're going to take a little touch truffled salt. Now, I didn't salt the eggs, if you notice, because the prosciutto itself, Prosciutto di Parma, even though it has a very low amount of salt, people, have a tendency to really focus and really notice the amount of salt in the meat. So there's enough salt in the Prosciutto di Parma to actually season the egg. So whenever you cook with Prosciutto di Parma, always remember that even though it tends to be a little bit, saltier than other ingredients, that just means that you don't have much salt into the dish. So these are our first little guys. So now we're going to do the Benedict. So we take, I'll just put it away. Take a nice big plate. We take our piece of toast. Now, when you're plating this, if you're going to plate this for someone, just think about this. See how easily that slid off the plate? That happened 100 times where it just dances around the plate. So this is another reason why I did the kale. Because I'm going to take a little piece of the kale, the Tuscan kale, and I'm going to put that on the bottom of the plate. This is going to act like glue. Hold it still. So now you can tip your plate and it doesn't slide all over the place. Okay? Now we take our little pieces of crispy prosciutto and we put a couple on the bottom. Now, I like putting a couple on the bottom and a couple on top, like this. And then we take our little piece of egg, our beautiful little poached egg. We put that on top. And it's best to do this, you know, fairly quickly because you don't want things to get too cold. But if it takes a couple minutes to plate this, that's fine. If you're doing a lot of people, you can just, you know, throw them all up at the same time, all up on the table at the same time. I shouldn't use that term, throw it up. No, don't do that. And now we just take a little bit of our Hollandaise sauce with a little bit of fresh thyme, and we just spoon it right on top. Okay, let it run off the sides. Let it run onto the plate. You wanna see it. You have it oozing and moving and looking almost alive. A little bit of fresh thyme on top just to help, you know, give it a little bump. And then we take another piece of the crispy prosciutto, and we're just gonna bring a small piece and put that on top, just so that you get another little piece of crispiness right on top of your eggs. I'm gonna do another one. You know what? That one's too small. We really want to spoil whoever's going to eat. We put a nice big piece right on the top. And that is our Italian eggs Benedict. You can also put, sometimes I will put an extra layer of the kale underneath the eggs. I might as well plate that. Well, we have any other questions? I'm just going to keep on plating this.
Actually, Chef, I wanted to ask you, how long can the sliced prosciutto be kept in the fridge, and how do you store it properly?
So prosciutto, once it's sliced, it will oxidize. I wouldn't say very quickly, but it does start to oxidize. So just like any, basically what we want to do is try and prevent oxygen from getting to the meat. So as tight, generally what I'll do is I'll just put it into a Ziploc bag and then try and extract as much air from the Ziploc bag as you, and then back into the fridge. Once it's sliced, say at the deli counter, you want to try and use it up within 3 or 4 days. If it's longer than 3 or 4 days, again, it's not the end of the world. It tastes good, but you'll just notice that the flavor will be a little bit different, and it'll be a little bit harder. It'll just be a little bit not so tough that you can't chew it, but I'm just holding this egg down with my finger because it wants to topple over. If you're wondering. So yeah, a few days really, and then just head back to the store and get a few more slices.
Perfect, thank you. And one other question: are nitrates in cured meat bad for you?
There's a lot of talk about that, and yeah, it's not the best thing. You don't want to eat nitrates, especially a lot of them. They're really not good. That's where Prosciutto di Parma really comes into play. That's where one of its biggest attributes, revolve around, because there are no nitrates. When it comes to Prosciutto di Parma, there are they say. Prosciutto or pig, from only 4 different breeds of pigs are allowed. Second ingredient is salt, and that is sea salt from the south of Italy, and which suppliers what product you can use as far as salt. The third ingredient is the air. And as I said earlier, the air really plays into the overall flavor of the product. If you take a ham that is produced in Parma, destined for Prosciutto di Parma, and you were to take it to the south and age it in the south of Italy, and then bring it back and try it, it would taste different. So it sounds kind of like a marketing thing. Air is one of the ingredients, but it really does play a factor into the flavor. And the fourth ingredient is time, because it takes a very long time. This prosciutto is that I sliced is, oh boy, just under 2 years. So almost 2 years of aging a piece of meat, of curing a piece of meat, of taking care of controlling it and making sure that it's aging properly. It's a lot of love goes into it, and Prosciutto di Parma is worth every single penny. That's why I'm here to show you guys how to respect it and how to treat it as more than just something that you shave a charcuterie board. It's wonderful that way. Don't get me wrong. I eat a ton of it that way, like probably too much of it that way. But I also love cooking with it. So I hope that these two super easy. I hope that they inspired you to start using and thinking about prosciutto di Parma as a cooking ingredient. Next week we're going to do some, in 2 weeks we're going to do a couple lunches. Is a very traditional way of working with prosciutto di Parma. And the other way is just me having a little bit of fun with prosciutto di Parma. So I hope you tune in. Are there any other? I say my goodbye.
Yes, actually, I think this is it for tonight. Thank you so much. You gave us a lot of insights about the prosciutto, and I think it was really, really a great class, very interesting. And we will have the opportunity to ask you more, I guess, as the series goes on.
Awesome.
Any other questions?
And again, if anyone has any questions, especially about prosciutto di Parma, feel free, just send me a message. Instagram is usually the best. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have about prosciutto di Parma, about IGP and DOP products, about anything in the culinary world of Italy. I will do my best to answer them. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Chef. So we'll see you again on October 27th. I would like to say thank you to Chef Roberto and a special thank you to the Consorzio del Prosciutto di Parma and to my colleagues, Astrid and Isabella, who worked on this series class, and everybody at the chamber for making this possible. On behalf of our executive director, Corrado Paina, thank you again for following us, for being always so numerous, and see you next week with the Calabria event, the Calabria cooking class. Ciao and buon appetito.